Release these courageous survivalists who tragically passed away.
Several deaths have been linked to life below zero. But the truth in 2026 is not what most people think. After years on life below zero, confusion and rumors have blurred the real story, especially around fan-favorite cast members. While the core faces of the show are still alive, the wider franchise has experienced real losses that many viewers don't fully understand. So, which Life Below Zero cast members are actually dead in 2026? Join us as we reveal the Life Below Zero cast members who are dead in 2026 and separate fact from fiction. Gary Muehlberger, the village elder who died the way he lived. Gary Muehlberger was born in Washington State and came to Port Protection, Alaska, when he was in his 30s. He stayed for 39 years. By the time the cameras arrived for Port Protection, Alaska in 2015, he was already a legend in the small community, not because he sought attention, but because he had simply been there longer than almost anyone else and had accumulated the specific kind of knowledge that 4 decades of Alaskan self-sufficiency produces. His personality on the show was the opposite of the performed toughness that other wilderness reality programs often cultivated. Gary Muehlberger was funny. He was self-deprecating in the specific way of someone who has been around long enough to know exactly how good he is at something and finds it genuinely amusing that other people keep being surprised by it. He once said, after carrying a deer out of the woods on his back at age 70 because his ATV had broken down, that he was not particularly impressed with the achievement. He joked about beer while shrimping. He admitted freely, "The orca is a way better fisherman than me." His most famous quote captured the philosophy of Port Protection itself. "The community here takes care of each other. My mom always taught me to share with people, that it makes you feel good." He had a dog named Trapper, who appeared alongside him in virtually every scene, riding in the boat, sitting on the porch, following him through the woods. The two were so consistently together that viewers who knew nothing else about Gary Muehlberger knew that wherever he went, Trapper went too. On March 17, 2021, a fire destroyed Gary's home on Prince of Wales Island. Authorities received the alert at approximately 11:30 in the morning and responded to the location in Port Protection. Gary Muehlberger had not been seen since before the fire. Alaska State Troopers and a deputy fire marshal examined what remained of the structure over the following days. Human remains were found inside. The state medical examiner confirmed the identification. The remains were those of Gary Muehlberger, aged 75. The fire was ruled accidental. The believed cause was a problem with his propane hot water tank, the same kind of equipment that everyone in Port Protection depends on and maintains by themselves, because there are no licensed plumbers who make house calls to roadless communities on Southeast Alaskan islands. Trapper survived. The season finale of Life Below Zero. Port Protection had aired the day before the fire. It was, in the cruelest possible timing, the last time any of the show's production had any connection to Gary Muehlberger while he was alive. Fans who had watched the finale and were processing what they had seen were simultaneously learning the news of his death. National Geographic issued a statement through the official Life Below Zero social media accounts. He was the heart and soul of Port Protection and a valuable member of our family. Gary was one of a kind, and we will miss him dearly. Sam Carlson, his fellow Port Protection fixture and one of his closest friends in the community, said what many people watching from outside were also feeling. Probably one of the last of the old breed. The community mourned him, and in the way that remote Alaskan communities process grief, they kept going, because the alternative is not viable when your survival depends on the same daily work that filled the life of the person you lost. The Port Protection community had barely processed the loss of Gary Muehlberger when another death arrived 3 months later. And the timing of it, specifically when Lizzie Botello went into surgery for her cancer, is one of the more heartbreaking details in the whole story of what this franchise lost in 2021. Who was Lizzie Botello, and what did she carry through all of it? Lizzie Botello, the one-armed woman who lost everything and still kept going. Lizzie Botello was in Norwalk, California, which is about as far from Port Protection, Alaska, as you can get in terms of environment and lifestyle. She was trained as a polymer clay sculptor and spent years making intricate aquatic-themed art, a career that sounds almost impossibly delicate compared to what her life eventually became. She met her husband, John Bean, and made the decision that people make when they find the person they want to live wherever he lives. She moved to Port Protection. She had been there for approximately 40 years by the time she appeared on the show. The quality that viewers noticed first about Lizzie Botello was that she had one arm and appeared to consider this detail about as significant as the color of her hair. She was nicknamed the One-Armed Mexican on the show, a designation she had given herself and wore with humor rather than defensiveness. She hunted, fished, and could fillet a fish with a speed and precision that led one fan to write, after learning of her death, simply, "I have missed seeing her. Love to watch her fillet fish." She had lived in Port Protection longer than most of its residents had been alive. She had been friends with Gary Muehlberger for nearly 40 years, long enough that Gary once said that he could start a story and Lizzie could finish it, which is the kind of thing you can only say about someone you have known in the specific way that comes from being neighbors in a community of 80 people at the edge of the world for 4 decades. The losses Lizzie Botello carried before her own death were significant enough that they deserved their own accounting. She and John had 2 sons together. Johnny Duarte grew up in Port Protection and eventually moved to Thorn Bay to work as a fishing deckhand. On June 20th, 2015, he was involved in a near head-on collision while driving to work near Klawock, Alaska. He was 19 years old, he was not wearing a seatbelt. He died of his injuries on July 17, 2015. The Port Protection community raised money through a neighbor action auction to help the family with his medical expenses, which is the kind of community response that Gary Muehlberger would have recognized as exactly what his mother had taught him about sharing. Their older son, Leland Calder Botello, born in 1991, died on July 27, 2017, at the age of 26. The circumstances of his death remain largely private, confirmed in Lizzie's obituary, but not publicly described in detail. In a comment Lizzie left on a Mother's Day blog post in 2019, she wrote about both of her sons in the past tense, and the comment was the clearest public acknowledgement she ever offered of the losses. "Both my sons were always trying to get me out hiking more. Both were avid hikers and hunters. 2 sons, both gone before their mother." In Port Protection, Lizzie Botello continued to live and fish and fillet and walk the beach and support her community, carrying losses that most people would not survive. On March 17, 2021, the same day that Gary Muehlberger's home caught fire and claimed his life, Lizzie Botello went into surgery for ovarian cancer. Her husband John Bean confirmed this detail in the Port Protection Facebook group after her death. She was already in surgery when her oldest friend in Port Protection died. She went into that operating room without knowing she would never see Gary Muehlberger again, that the person she had known for 40 years was already gone. She died 3 months after Gary, on June 25, 2021, at the age of 62, in the home she had occupied for 4 decades in Port Protection. Her obituary in the Ketchikan Daily News confirmed that both of her sons had preceded her in death. She was survived by her husband John and by a grandchild, Sancho Bean. But what about the core Life Below Zero cast? Why do the rumors about their deaths persist? And what is the actual status of every major figure from the flagship series in 2026? The living cast and the rumors that will not stop. Sue Aikens has been reported dead so many times that it has become a particular kind of dark absurdity. The most persistent death hoax appeared in March 2023 when multiple websites reported her passing at age 57. The details were specific enough to seem credible to people who did not investigate. A named location, a cause of death, official-sounding language. None of it was true. Sue Aikens was born on July 1, 1963. In March 2023, she was 59, not 57, and she was alive, managing Kavik River Camp 197 miles north of the Arctic Circle, as she has done for decades. In a March 2025 live chat following the show's end, she reported that her workload had actually increased once filming paused, because the production schedule had at least provided some structure to her days, and running the camp alone without that structure meant every task was entirely her own responsibility. She was posting regular photos of aurora nights, storms, and wildlife. She is 62 years old as of 2026 and still at Kavik River Camp. The bear attack that defined her early seasons of the show happened in 2007, 6 years before Life Below Zero premiered. She was living alone at Kavik River Camp in an area with 83 tagged grizzlies. A bear attacked her and left her with a head injury, a torn shoulder muscle, and a dislocated knee. She lay in the grass for 10 days before being found. When she recovered, she returned to the area where the attack had happened, found the bear, and shot it. Her response to the experience, quoted at the time, "You're never more alive than when you're on the edge." She said afterward that the attack was terrifying, but that leaving Kavik River Camp was simply not something she considered. She has been there ever since. Another cast members, Chip and Agnes Hailstone, remain in Norvik with their children and growing number of grandchildren. Chip confirmed publicly in November 2024 that the show was ending, stating plainly that there was no contract to continue and that the family would carry on living as they have always lived, hunting caribou and muskrat and geese, fishing whitefish and she-fish seasonally, practicing the traditional Inupiaq subsistence skills that Agnes has maintained throughout her life, and that the show had documented for 12 years. Chip has recently been making traditional ulu knives from spring steel and teaching the craft. The Hailstones, with their 7 children and now more than 25 grandchildren, represent perhaps the most complete portrait of how subsistence life in northern Alaska actually looks from the inside, across generations, and the family continues that life with or without National Geographic filming it. Jesse Holmes won the 2025 Iditarod, finishing in 10 days, 14 hours, 55 minutes, and 44 seconds. The Iditarod covers approximately 1,000 miles across Alaska in conditions that would end most people's lives within hours of the start. Holmes won it. He lives in Brushkana with approximately 40 sled dogs and continues the hunting, fishing, and dog mushing that defined his time on the show. His 2025 Iditarod victory is the most direct possible evidence against the death rumors. You cannot win a 1,000-mile dog sled race posthumously. Glenn Villeneuve, who spent his life below 0 years in the Brooks Range and has since built a life that includes marriage and children alongside continued wilderness pursuits, remains active and competitive in endurance athletics in addition to his subsistence lifestyle. But where exactly are the death hoaxes coming from, and which of them are real? The deaths that were real and the deaths that were not. The pattern of false death claims around Life Below Zero cast members follows a recognizable internet playbook. A clickbait site publishes a fabricated death notice for a cast member who has been out of the news cycle. The claim is specific enough to seem credible. It gets shared on Facebook groups dedicated to the show, where fans who have not yet heard the news react with grief. Other clickbait sites pick up the story and amplify it. By the time the debunking catches up, thousands of people have already processed the false information emotionally, which means some percentage of them will continue to believe it even after the denial, because the emotional experience of thinking someone has died is not easily undone by a correction. The reason these hoaxes find an audience around this franchise specifically is that the premise of the show creates a constant background of plausible risk. These are people who live in places where bears, cold, equipment failures, and isolation all represent genuine threats. The audience has watched Sue Aikens describe her 10 days lying injured on the tundra after the bear attack. They have watched Chip Hailstone discuss the reality of hunting in conditions where a wrong decision kills you. They have watched Jesse Holmes manage 40 dogs in Alaska winter. The danger is real enough that when a claim surfaces saying that one of them has died, it does not require a dramatic fictional scenario to be believed. The scenario the hoax describes is always just plausible enough to land. The two deaths that were real, Gary Muehlberger in March 2021 and Lizzie Botello in June 2021, received far less sustained viral attention than the fabricated deaths of cast members who are still alive. The actual losses of real people are processed and moved past quickly, while the false claims about living people generate sustained traffic because they are designed to be shareable in the way that genuine grief is not. What the port protection community did with those losses was consistent with what remote Alaskan communities have always done with death. They buried their dead, they honored their memory in the practical ways available to people who do not have funeral homes or memorial services with catered receptions, and they kept living because the alternative, especially in a community that small and that self-reliant, is not survivable. Sam Carlson, who had known Gary Muehlberger for years and described him as probably one of the last of the old breed, appeared in subsequent seasons of the show and continued to live and work in port protection as he had done for 50 years. The community that Gary and Lizzie had been part of continued to exist after they were gone, which was the only tribute available to it and which both of them would have understood perfectly. What led to the end of the franchise? Where the franchise ends and what remains? Life Below Zero ended in February 2025 after 23 seasons. The ending was not unexpected. The franchise had been running for 12 years. The spin-offs had multiplied and then consolidated, and by the time the final season aired, National Geographic and the production company had given the show what amounts to a planned farewell rather than a sudden cancellation. The integration of port protection cast members into the final season of the main show was designed specifically to give the full community a collective goodbye, acknowledging that these shows had always been about the same thing. People who had chosen to live at the edge of what most people consider possible, and who found that choice meaningful rather than simply difficult. The cast members who are alive in 2026 are not living differently because the cameras have stopped. This is the thing about the Life Below Zero franchise that distinguished it from most reality television. The people on the show were not performing lives they had constructed for the camera. They were living lives they had chosen before the camera arrived. And they have continued to live those lives after the camera left. The deaths that the franchise has experienced, both the real ones and the endless false rumors about the living, reflect something true about what made the show work in the first place. Life Below Zero captured people in circumstances where the distance between life and continuing to live is maintained by daily, deliberate effort, and where failure in that effort is not metaphorical, but literal. Gary Muehlberger spent 39 years maintaining that effort in port protection and died when a piece of equipment in his own home failed in a way he could not have predicted or prevented. Lizzie Botello maintained it for 40 years, outliving both of her sons, and died of a cancer she had been fighting privately while her oldest friend was dying on the same day. The show did not make these people vulnerable to Alaska. Alaska was the fact of their lives. The show simply pointed a camera at what that fact looked like, day after day, winter after winter, for 12 years. What remains in 2026 is the record of it, the people still living it, and 2 graves in the community of port protection that the remaining residents pass every time they go about the work of surviving. Of all the people you watched on Life Below Zero and its spin-offs, who left the deepest impression on you? And are you surprised by any of what you just learned? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.